Here's an idea. Amiibos have been turning consumers into collectors. After visiting my pals at Toy Pizza a couple weeks ago, I started thinking lots about toys, collectibles, and what I think they're for.
Guys, yeah, this is not fun.
Which, now that I think about it, probably explains last week's episode about Lego, and also has turned out to be accidentally great timing given all of the hullabaloo surrounding Nintendo's Amiibos. Amiibos are collectible video game characters that communicate with the Wii U and new 3DS to unlock and store game extras and player stats, and like Samus's skills on Zabus, they are in demand. Absurdly low stock, which some people claim is purposeful, scalpers, bizarre edition, retail, and distribution strategies, and a dock worker strike, not kidding, have created a dearth of Marths, Max, and Meta Knights. A gray market of bulk purchased and resold rare and defective Amiibos, one selling for 25 grand, has formed online, as have, of course, communities of collectors, many of whom are very upset about the situation.
A normal boy or girl like me can't even get the toys he wants!
Now, people collect Amiibos for the reasons that people collect anything: to develop or advertise the skill, effort, or wealth related to collections, to associate themselves with what they perceive the thing being collected to mean, to preserve or display that meaning for others. All summed up by a Baudrillard quote that we used in our morning routines video: what you really collect is always yourself. But my question is, how do things generally, and Amiibos specifically, end up having that meaning that makes them worth collecting? Archaeologist Ioahnuh wrote that an object can gain cultural meaning, as opposed to scientific meaning, in 3 ways. First, the many effects it can have on the world, its utility or functionality. Second, the fact of its symbolic existence, being, quote, part of a code, set, or structure. In other words, objects generally are meaningful because they are symbols. Specific objects are meaningful because of where and how they fit into the larger structure of symbols. And third, to what their symbolism refers, the values or ideas that a singular object may represent. Hutter calls this the historical content of the object itself. It's why your grandfather's watch is so meaningful. Amiibos are neat because generally their utility and the way that they fit into that larger structure of things sort of straddle some lines. They sit in the sometimes controversial doll action figure collectible disputed zone, but also because they are a Nintendo computer product, they embody the toy video game dichotomy. Which is to say, if a Link Amiibo isn't displayed proudly and set loose in a game of Super Smash Bros., he's not living up to his full potential. I don't know if everyone my age had exactly this experience, but I got my first NES in 1989 for Christmas, and back then there was no hesitation in calling it a toy. I don't think that's true anymore. I think home video game console is no longer perfectly synonymous with toy, and I think that that is a symptom of video games having not entirely grown up. As I've matured, so too have video games, and cartoons as well, but not, at least not similarly, toys, and certainly not the collection of them. Where it's understandable, if not expected, that people like me and my pals will play video games and watch animated television shows, for the general, totally uncool populace, adults collecting and displaying figurines remains a marginally aberrant behavior. Unless we're talking about your grandmother's Hummel collection. That is totally normal somehow. But I think Amiibos address this. By virtue of the fact an Amiibo is a computer product with a utility, 2 things happen. If they don't mature collectibles per se, then they at least advance them technologically by giving them a networked purpose, by giving them another set of objects to be a part of. Insofar as entertainment and design have gone from physical to digital, we're sort of in this spot of physical meets digital, with stuff like vinyl records that have download codes, the Internet of Things, and stuff like Disney Infinity, Skylanders, and Amiibos. For me, these empowered collectibles inch closer to action figures because they do something. They can take action. They're not simply an inert object. They can be used or consumed. And this is significant because, as David Banish wrote, use is one way to distinguish a consumer from a collector. It's in making a collectible consumable that the act of collecting it makes it less wacky in the eyes of many people. Amiibos are collectibles which are usable, collectibles apologizing for their collectability in some way, but also weirdly legitimizing it through their relationship with video games, a widely understood and accepted hobby, which might partially explain why the low stock is so vexing. Amiibos encourage and enable collecting in, I think, new and interesting ways, but also make it frustrating and impossible. We could only get 4 of the most common ones via Amazon. And this situation is exactly the one that creates collectors. Banash again writes that it's only when the object is unavailable that consumers recognize themselves in the figure of the collector. It makes me wonder how much frustration and discussion and community building has occurred around Amiibos because people want simply to be consumers but have been turned into collectors by Nintendo. Gotta catch them all. All of this is to say, though normatively speaking, adults shouldn't play with toys, Amiibo's scarcity and relationship to much beloved video games and characters make them very attractive and complex objects. Which actually also caused me to wonder one final thing about toys and collections generally. When I was old enough to want things like Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joes, and Transformers, not a young kid where my parents were just buying indestructible toys and putting them in front of me, but an older kid without discretionary income yet, but still capable of convincing my parents to spend their hard-earned cash on mass-produced molded plastic figures of major market media entities, I never played with those toys. At least not in the way the commercials showed kids playing with them. I would arrange them. I took a lot of them apart. I don't remember exactly why I wanted them. Maybe because my friends had them, or because I thought Michelangelo was cool, or because I liked collecting them. Either way, it wasn't to do this kind of stuff.
Get him, rock and roll! Here comes Grand Slam!
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
But here's the thing, I still had tons of fun. I loved those toys. They were able to take on all of that meaning. They became important. Which makes me realize that while the distinction between consumer and collector might be a clear one, the distinction between collector and player might be less so. And maybe Amiibos speak to that uncertain link. What do you guys think? Have Amiibos turned consumers into collectors? Do they illustrate some blurry line between what it means to collect versus play? Let us know in the comments. And you know exactly what I'm gonna say. Idea Channel collects records. What? Was that not what you thought I was gonna say? We have so many records. Because of reasons, all of which are very good, we have to do comment responses from my apartment this week. Let's see what you guys had to say about the Lego Movie and copyright. First things first, I want to make it clear that I am in agreement with Carter Heitkamp here that, there are a lot of things that are wrong with copyright, a lot of things that need to be fixed, but I don't mean to suggest in any way that I'm saying that copyright needs to be abolished. I think that that would be overcorrecting just in the completely opposite direction, and that, I think of myself as being pretty far left in the copy fight, but I'm not saying that there should be no system to protect creative works. President business! It's almost like Lego pays a lot of money to show their ads before YouTube videos that have their name in the title. I hope you at least saw something cool. I think I saw the same Lego Star Wars commercial about 1,000 times, which is something I'm not interested at all in, even a little bit. Definitely don't need those, any of the Lego sets for Star Wars. Not interested in the Millennium Falcon even a little. Ioahnuh had some qualms with the premise of last week's video, saying that we're not really asking whether people think the Lego Movie is about copyright, but rather just asking if people think in general that less restrictive copyright is a good idea, because you can kind of read whatever message you want into the Lego Movie, that the narrative is open enough that if you are looking for a cause, you will find it. And I think this is really interesting because in the comments from last week, there was no shortage of alternate readings for the Lego Movie. Here are a couple. Blair Einfeld saw it as being about education. Not Gaius Baltar saw it as a message against capitalism. Nicholas Breilmeyer saw it as being not about less restrictive copyright, but about just the importance of being creative, of thinking outside of the box in general. And yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty valid criticism, that if you can read any cause into what they're working towards, or a lot of causes into what they're working towards, at what point do you say that the movie is definitely about this thing? Maybe you can't. Definitely not going to ask the author about it, that's for sure. My Fat Sushi brings up the problems that occur when Lord Business tries to craggle extended universes and talks about Star Wars specifically, and this actually brings to mind something that I was thinking about, another sort of big topic for the Lego movie, which is intertextuality, which is, sort of when characters or ideas or settings cross their own borders and interact with characters and ideas and settings from other universes, which, right, I mean, the Lego movie has by the dozens, and I actually had never thought about the intertextual nature of one universe, that there actually is intertextuality between what we see on screen from Star Wars and what there is in books and comic books and other media. And yeah, this was sort of opened my eyes a little bit. Thank you for writing this comment. It was a great comment. Links to this one and all the others in the doobly-doo. And on that intertextuality note, Joshua Haveman talks about how in order to really get at what's happening in the Lego movie, maybe it would be helpful to take a look at a film the directors worked on before, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which I love, and, talks about how both of these movies are about kind of innovating in the face of a force that wants to make sure that that's not happening. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe that does give credence to some of the readings of the Lego movie that we were talking about a couple minutes ago, about how, maybe it's about just the importance of thinking outside the box. Liquefied Butter, I have been thinking about this for the last week, and Girl Talk was the person that I sort of settled on as being the closest as well. I also thought about Kirby Ferguson and Eclectic Method. It's sort of like mashup, video mashup DJ stuff. That's really great if you don't know it. But I was thinking about, what are the requirements of the real life Finn? They're gonna show the culture industry that the creative reuse of pre-existing culture is not only fun, which I guess would probably mean profitable, but also has an important relationship to creativity moving forward. And I don't know, call me a cynic, I don't think that there's anyone positioned to do that right now. Girl Talk is the closest, but still not quite there. Yeah, those were oil trees. They don't grow back. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these collectible minifigs. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit. Links in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from Darlin Lilytooth, who asks what IKEA says about the humanoid rock condition. I love this. I didn't even know. I love that there are stools that are put together wrong, because I have done that. The crystal gems, they're just like us, except for the fact that they're alien space rocks.